Hi, everybody. We are presenting a roundtable on reflective practice, how to trigger reflection, where are we at, and what's being done. This presentation is by Dr. Floriceli Zeichulim from the Universidad de Quintana Roo, Dr. Giovanna Godinez Martinez from ELT Services and Consulting, Dr. Suzanne Guilmet, Université de Sherbrooke, Dr. Patricia Hood, Universidad de Guanajuato, and Dr. Kenneth Richter from the Universidad de Guanajuato. We will present a variety of research studies in the field of reflective practice for analyzing teaching praxis in Mexican and Canadian context. We will focus on innovative tools and strategies used in research, in individual and written reflection, as well as collective and dialogic reflection. We're going to work with questions and answer. The first question for this roundtable is addressed to Giovanna. Could you tell us what model of reflective practice you have used in your research, please?
Of course. So this model is not something that I was able to obtain from other previous studies. It's a model that I have developed throughout my years of study in reflective practice. So I began doing research on reflective practice in 2013. And from then, I started to work with several options that other researchers had put forward regarding reflective practice. Most of their procedures had to do with having participants and then systematizing the process in a way, and then adding a reflective tool to aid critical reflexivity in participants. However, when I began my research, I saw that this process was too linear. Linear in the sense that it promoted change in a very, you reflect, you use a tool, and then something changes in your practice and you become a better practitioner. So moving away from that linear, very simplistic form of viewing reflective practice, and now throughout my years of doing research, I developed this model that I will actually publish in an article by the end of the month or the beginning of the month. So how I've seen and how I view reflective practice now through experience is we have to invite people, practitioners who possess a certain readiness. And when readiness, I refer to the qualities of reflective practitioner that Wallace put forward in 1991. So he says that practitioners have to be willing, open to change, flexible with other points of view and beliefs, able to break paradigms and fixed thoughts regarding teaching, and open to collaboration and action in reflection. So once you talk to participants and discuss what reflective practice procedures entail, and you observe these qualities, then you can move on to systematize the process by having a space, a time, and a way to conduct reflective practice. And what I've done is just agreeing with them on the time, on the space, and the modes of reflection. I always leave up to them. I have seen through my research and other people's research that when you allow practitioners and participants to engage in the process by choosing times, modes, ways of reflection, it actually becomes meaningful to them because they reflect in a natural way what suits them, what comes naturally to them as people and as practitioners. And then once you choose the tool or they choose their tools, we are able to conduct the process, and also they choose the times, they choose when they want to share information with you. And for this, they usually use my support as a colleague, not an evaluator or a trainer who knows more than them. No, as a peer, as a colleague. So we share views, we talk about, we discuss these reflections, we discuss what they become aware of regarding their practice through the cycle, and they decide on an action to conduct. And their actions are moved and enhanced by these reflections that we discuss, that we view, that we talk about through observations, journals, recording, discussions, text messages, and they choose the actions that they want to carry out, because this is the last part of the cycle. And it's important. A reflection needs to move you to take an action. And this action will probably impact something in your practice. And this impact will impact other areas, such as your community, your students, the students' learning, the processes and strategies that you choose to continue applying or stop in your practice. So this is the model that I've come to develop and use throughout my experience with reflective practice in English language teaching.
Thank you, Giovanna. Would you like to ask a question to another colleague?
Yes, sure. After reading our research, I was thinking of asking Flori the following question. What are the levels of reflection, and can we measure reflection in research?
Thank you, Giovanna. Well, some researchers have come up with different terms to refer to levels of reflection. Some of them, you can see them in the image there. You can see dialogic reflection, transformative reflection, or they refer to the repair level, review level, etc. Although different terms are used to refer to the levels, they call them dimensions, rubric, framework, etc. They all entail developing from a very descriptive and superficial stage to a critical one. Some researchers claim that reflection usually begins with a lack of a structured approach of the process of reflection. So in a way to solve this or to help with this, many of them have proposed different levels. It's important to say that the intention of these levels is not that of measuring reflection, but guiding the process and helping practitioners reach a higher or deeper level of reflection and to guide the process itself. Thank you. I will show you a classification of the levels that I used during my PhD research back in 2014. My proposal of levels is based mainly on Ward and McCudder's reflection form, while considering other researchers' proposals of typical questions, such as those of Jay and Johnson. It's divided into 4 levels: the non-reflective level, a descriptive or technical level, a comparative one, and a critical or transformative level. The purpose of this proposal is to use the rubric as a formative tool in which we can observe the dimensions of focus, inquiry, and change, which can be used as formative guides to help other teachers or practitioners evaluate, understand, and improve their own reflection. In the first level, for example, the non-reflective level focus is on describing a class, for example, the students, the activities. There is no really inquiry or change. I won't describe each level in detail due to time constraints, so I only mean to show you that these 4 levels state what the practitioner is supposed to do and focus on, depending on the level they need or want to achieve. I can say, for example, that in the 4th level, the focus is on the context and ethical and moral concerns, and how these have an impact on the students and teaching practice. In this level, there is a change of assumption, beliefs, and even teaching objectives and practice from ethical and moral perspectives, for instance. I do have to acknowledge that this rubric was a really good guide for me during my research. However, it also made me realize 2 important things. The first one, well, there was a moment during the research when I did try to force my participants to a higher level. Having this rubric made me feel that I had to do it that way. Then I realized that it was not possible because each person had his or her own process, rhythm, interest of reflection. It was not my purpose to force the practitioners to achieve the highest level during the intervention, but to make them notice the potential benefits of becoming critical reflective practitioners. I had to respect their process. The second thing was that I noticed that some of the participants showed a descriptive level in terms of the inquiry and the change dimensions, but they also focus on aspects that the rubric considered only for the third and fourth level of reflection. Therefore, I had to keep in mind once again that each person focuses on what they need or want. Yes, it was a good guide. It was just a guide. So I can say that the focus of reflection can change from person to person. What we need to pay attention to, in my experience, is to the inquiry and the change dimensions to guide the practitioners to a higher level of reflection. I can say that based on my experience in that project and answering the second question is that no, reflection cannot be measured because every person has a different process. Reflection is something very personal, and these levels of reflection can only give us an idea about how to address it to improve the process itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Floricelli. That was great. Thank you. Very important. Would you like to ask someone a question?
Yes, I would like to ask Suzanne. Suzanne, in the collective accompaniment model, what is a PIP and what does it serve?
Well, thank you for the question. Maybe we can change the slide. Yes, all right. So, well, Giovanna was just telling us about going from a linear model to a circle model. What I have introduced in my practices is the PIP as a tool in through a circle model to analyze practices. Therefore, the PIP means Professional Intervention Project. And it's kind of a roadmap that allows the person to explain to us what is the initial situation that the person is working on and what is the target situation and how we can go to a questioning process to allow that person to take a step back and look at her or his practices and adjust the practices to be able to go through the situation and get that target situation. Therefore, the PIP wants to allow the person to take the step back, and so we can go through that questioning process through listening to the initial situation, trying to understand the initial situation, and giving feedback throughout this initial situation, and making sure that that person can make first a reflection on the practices and eventually reflexivity and go through that reflexivity process, meaning that that person will be able to name different dimension, cognitive, affective, professional schemes, and also develop her own or his own professional identity. Therefore, the PIP is used in a group dynamic. So each person sitting at a table is having its own PIP and will explain what they're living in their classroom, for example, and we will be questioning that PIP to make sure that that person can take the step back. Now, let's look at how we can question this PIP. Just a few minutes ago, Flori, you were telling us that we cannot measure reflection, but we can certainly observe it. And so also you were explaining to us that there are different levels of reflection. So what we do with the PIP is to question the person so we can go through different levels of reflections. In the model that I have developed, we have 4 types of focus. First, we want to better understand the situation, and then we want to better analyze the context so that person can better plan what are next steps to do, and then be able to reflect on their own professional development. Therefore, there are 4 focus, and there are 4 loops of reflection. We can have a loop on the self and the situation. We can look at what are the resources that we have or that we can use to respond to that situation. We can look at our own practices, and we can also look at what kind of professional development I'm going through. Therefore, we will be asking different questions if we want to reflect, or if we want to reflect on our own reflection, as what we'll be calling reflexivity. So to understand the situation, going from one loop to another, what I have done is trying to put out some questions that can help someone to go from one focus to another, and also one loop to another. So these are examples of questions that I've been documented in the different researches that I have been doing. So if we want to understand the situation, we can, in the loop 1, when we want to better understand, we can ask questions like, where is the problem? But if I want to go to reflect on their own reflection, I can ask people what strategies they can develop to complete their project. So I'm not gonna read all the questions that are on the board right now, but what I want to show you is that depending on the question we are asking, we'll go from reflection to reflexivity. We can go from one loop to another, and the PIP is the real situation that I'm living, and that I'll be answering the question that are been asked to me.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was great. I understand you have a question for Ken.
Well, we've been talking about reflection and reflexivity, and I would like to know how Ken can measure the effect of the CAM intervention on teachers' beliefs.
Floria was talking about how to measure reflection, which was a super interesting discussion. I'd like to talk about something called the repertory grid, which comes out of personal construct psychology and George Kelly's work in the 1950s. The Repgrid instrument doesn't measure reflection directly, but does, I think, help clarify the cognitive results of the reflective process. What a Repgrid is a semi-structured interview in which the researcher and the participant work together to create a list of constructs. Constructs is just a fancy way of talking about beliefs, perceptions, ideas that inform or drive action in a given domain. Patty and I are right now doing research into collective accompaniment, helping language teachers, and so that's the domain that we're interested in. We've had interviews with Repgrid interviews with a number of our participants, but right now I'm just presenting a slide of the constructs of a single participant. There was actually 2 interviews, a pre-CAM intervention interview and a post-CAM intervention interview. And looking at the screen, you can see a list of the constructs. Go ahead, Patty. The reason that they're different colors is because after the constructs were elicited, we worked together with the participants to categorize those. You can move ahead, Patty. Yeah, these were categorized, and you can move ahead one more. So that after the categorization process, basically we had 3 groups of constructs, those having to do with professionalism, those having to do with inter and interpersonal characteristics, and then those having to do with professionalization. And beneath those, some subcategories. So very quickly, these were the results of a single participant's experience with the CAM intervention. First of all, there was a growth in the number of constructs. In the first interview, the participant came up with 17 constructs, and in the second interview, the participant was able to create 19 constructs. Within personal construct psychology, what that means is that we're seeing some kind of cognitive development or an ability to appreciate nuance. She particularly changed her constructs in the area of the category professionalism. How she ranked those constructs also changed as a result of the CAM process. The most important constructs for her before the process were responsibility, achievement, and knowledge. But after going through the CAM process, she felt that experience and natural ability and dynamism were the most important things for her particular teaching. The concept of experience was the most interesting change because in the first interview, she said that experience was the least important thing. And after the CAM process, she said that that experience was the most important quality of a good language teacher. She defined that experience as being able to analyze groups and make a class work through the practical experiences of using different teaching methodologies. There is also what I'm calling a process of reification. And by that, I mean making these concepts real for her, specific to her particular situation. In a follow-up interview after the two Repgrid interviews, she noted that her pre-CAM constructs tended to describe general attributes of language teachers, but after the process, those same constructs described herself in her own personal role of an instructor. For instance, what she used to call organized, which is sort of a general or vague concept that she applied to all teachers in sort of a generic way, she changed to the very specific construct organized whiteboard, which is more like an action statement that has meaning for herself and what she needs to do to be a better teacher. Finally, overall, she reported that the CAM process helped her to worry less about administrative requirements and gave her permission to focus her energies on her students and how to help them. And obviously, I could go on and on about this interview, but the bottom line is that after this CAM process, she herself saw a lot of change. And I think the Repgrid interview helped clarify those changes for her and obviously for us.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Now I have a question for you.
Okay.
It all comes around. You and I have been working together on this project. These are some of the results of the study that we've been working on about your CAM program. And so I would like to ask you how these reflections emerged during the collective accompaniment model that you've been taking part in directing, guiding.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. I just want to say that the CAM model is Suzanne's. So she developed the model and I'm using it in the sessions that I'm running with the participants. And what I've been finding is very interesting is how reflection evolves during the process. And this could apply to the CAM or to any other model. I think this is quite applicable in different ways of reflection, because reflection is not static, as we know. It's always moving. It's very dynamic. So I'm hoping that the figure to the left of the slide can portray this. There's a lot of things going on during a reflection process when we're doing reflection on our professional practices. So this is an analytical framework for reflection in, on, and for action. Reflection in, on, for action came from Schoen and Van Manen. We do different things while we're actually thinking about and trying to analyze our teaching practice. here I have 6 different dimension. Flori was talking about dimension, I think, of reflection. I like to look at it as different stages or dimension, because we're never in just one place, you know, we're moving around. So the first one at the top is me and my outer or external world. And this is actually coming from FEL when he developed his reflection model or framework for TESOL professional in 2015. And this is something we don't really control because this is imposed on us. It's our context, the conditions that we work in, the factors that are external to us. Then we also have another dimension, which is my professional development and growth, which is when we take a meta posture to look at what we're doing and then look for an action plan, or we try to develop something that will work for our practice. And everybody is at a different stage of their teaching practice. We all have different experiences, years of practices and stuff. So nobody will have the same process of reflection as other of my colleagues have mentioned. And then we also look at what our teaching practice is in the now. What's going on in my classroom reality right now in this moment, what's happening. So this is what is currently going on. And as Suzanne mentioned, we look at the internal and external resources that we have in our environment, the support system that we have, the solutions that we can find inside or outside of us, the strategies we can use to improve and better our practice, right? And then there's the puzzling. We always start from the puzzling or the troubling issue and the situation. So there's obviously a gap between the reality and the actual practice, what's going on in the classroom, which creates doubts and difficulties. And we come to realizations because something is not working for us. There's something in balance, right? And then it all comes down to my inner self. You know, this is also something that is part of who I am as a teacher, the belief system that I have, my upbringing, my values, my schemata, who am I as a person will also influence how I do reflection on my practice. So this is a model that I created when I did my doctorate program, and I used Suzanne Guilmette's reflection and learning loops. She's been talking about loops today. So I combined Thomas Farrell's framework and Suzanne's learning loops. And I also added the dimension of the inner self, which Suzanne also talks about. But I think we cannot forget who we are. So the way we reflect is very, very dynamic, it's a movement, you know, we can't exactly say where we situate reflection, but it has all these dimensions that I'm presenting now. That's how I see the emergence of reflection. Thank you, Ken, for your question. It's been wonderful to talk to all of you. I think Giovanna might have something to say.
Right. So basically, it's just to conclude our presentation. And as you can see, we all view, as researchers, we all view reflective practice as a process that needs some sort of system and establishment. And we also need reflective tools and ways and modes to enhance or promote reflexivity in the participants, in the practitioners that share with us their experiences. And with these modes and tools and also ways of asking, we create a system that allows teachers to engage in processes of critical reflexivity and then have some outcome for their teaching. It might be change, it might be becoming aware, it might be just being aware of something they hadn't seen before in their practice. And those stages help you to move forward and advance as practitioners in any field, really. So that would be all on our behalf. Thank you so much for joining us.
And these are our references for this presentation. Thank you all.